China has a zero COVID policy. And in the next few tweets and images, we're going to sort of show what a zero COVID policy can look like when it is implemented by an authoritarian state. So this should not be taken, by the way, as showing these footage, as endorsement of any of the comments with which Twitter users upload the images and clips. I know there are some people out there who see what the tweet is saying and assume that we've put it up because we agree with them, and then they get mad. That's not what happens. But let's start with Jordan Peterson, who's an unusual person to be weighing in on this. So we have this video here. Could this be any more soul-chilling? Is it real? Does a fate such as this await us? And below, screams from souls tormented in authoritarian hell. So you can hear people
当然，我理想不能出门啊，不是说不能出小区啊。
eerie.
Oh my god.
这不行的嘛，这样弄下去就
From a
出
horror
事。
movie. So the glaring lights from the
Yeah, the lights blinking and so on and so forth.
Jesus Christ.
Now, that could, obviously, you could say, oh, well, it's easy to put a sound file over something like that. But I've heard a lot of people talking about this and so on, and I do not believe this is fake at all. And you can tell from the echo as well that this is shouting coming out over a large and sort of echoey distance.
Do they literally have the police or the army on the doorstep of the apartment?
So,
blocks to
as
stop
I
them?
understand it, there's security,
Right.
whatever that means, sometimes building security and so on, or quarantine security, who are at the foot of the buildings, and if anyone tries to get out, they will stop them or call the police and so on and so forth. So people are stuck in their high-rise
So
apartments.
they're all potentially starving without water.
Yeah, so this is Shanghai as well, which is one of China's poster cities, one of its best, most international, most free, or at least authoritarian cities. And this is apparently happening there. It's really bad. So some stories that I've heard about this are that the government has taken control of food distribution, perhaps not in Shanghai, but in some regions, some cities in China and so on. And so you can order food on an app, but of course, everyone is doing that at the same time.
Yes, and
the
panic
infrastructure
trying to-
can't cope. If you do get stuff, you get a few vegetables and that's it. And most people, there are people who've put videos out of them just repeatedly trying to order on this, and it just says can't order, can't order, can't order, and that's it. That's the only way to get food. Is you're locked
So
in your
it just
building.
looks like everyone's panic buying.
Yeah. But then again, they've. It's a long story. Let's go through the tweets. So here we go. China, 25 million people in lockdown in Shanghai, policed by drones that have facial recognition and give orders. People who go out onto their balconies without masks are fined directly from their central bank digital currency account. So China has quite an advanced digital currency system. And then she adds, coming soon to a new world order near you. Well, this, I don't know about that, but this is certainly one of the problems you have when you put things like access to food or distribution of food in the hands of the state. They mess it up just like the state messes everything up if you let
but
it.
if by New World Order she's talking about the vision that the World Economic Forum has, then that may not be inaccurate, given that they want to abolish not just private property, but privacy in its entirety. And by deduction, you must have a completely planned economy. And planned economies, as we know historically, can cause this sort of thing.
Absolutely. If we go to the next one, so this is Jack Posobiec claiming 193 million people are now under full or partial lockdown in 23 cities across China. And again, this is because of coronavirus. This is because there are coronavirus cases that have been contact traced. If we go to the next one, so this is what contact tracing means on the ground. So the quote here, remember contact tracing, this is what happens in China when one person tests positive. So they appear to have shut the whole thing down. And of course, the frustrating irony of it is that they've put so many people in such close proximity that they're basically spreading it. It's madness.
I'm actually lost for words at how stupid they are. Not the poor souls who are, of course, stuck it because they don't have a blooming choice of the state.
Absolutely. This is why the state should never be let in charge of something as vital as food and medicine and whether you can leave your house. And there are also lots of footage of dogs and cats being killed in the streets.
I've heard about
Plenty of videos of that, which we will obviously not show because this is depressing enough without that, like pictures of sackfuls of cats and dogs.
I'd also
in the
recommend
street.
not searching it in your own time either. It's really not...
Yeah. And then here we have a load of people. This is allegedly a quarantine facility where they've literally just put out these beds in the middle of a hangar or a warehouse, again in close proximity, so they can cram as many in as possible.
Obviously, they're not going to give them proper burials, are they?
No, well, they're alive as far as I'm
Oh, are
aware.
they? Oh, okay.
Yes, but still, that's not particularly reassuring. If you've got COVID, that's probably not the first place you want to be.
No. Well,
If we go to the next one, so this is people allegedly ransacking an area for food. Apparently there's a shop there and so on. They're just going and grabbing what they can and getting out. Again, you don't normally see disorder in China, especially not somewhere like Shanghai,
No.
one of the better cities.
I mean, as authoritarian as their form of order is, one thing you could credit China with is actually keeping order intact.
Well,
That's one of the benefits of a
that's what it
one-party
looks
state,
like,
or it
at
looks
least
like.
from the outside.
Yes,
because
of course,
they are very
they
selective.
have a very, very tight rein on the news that comes out of China, of course.
Yes.
Hence why we're approaching it in this way.
No, absolutely. And they probably don't want you seeing, for example, this one, which is the next one.
No.
So this is someone recording from their balcony, and oh look, they're just arresting someone there who tried to run away. And you notice the quarantine police, or whoever they are just dressed head to toe in these sort of biological warfare suits. And there's more like this if we go to the next one. Again, this looks like someone
Oh my God.
beating someone up.
Then
Yeah. I know. For your health, guys, for your health. And if we go to the next one. Again, so we have some people here. One of them's in the uniform and everything. The others look like volunteers because they're in casual clothes. And they've got, what do you call these things? It's like a stick with a hook on it so that you can hold someone, but you can maintain your social distancing from them.
I've no idea. All I know is that they use similar tools in The Walking Dead for collecting zombies.
Right, okay. And yeah, it does not look very pleasant. If we go to the next one. Yeah, this is just what it looks like on the streets. There's a child in there,
Oh my
apparently.
God.
They say it's a child. It could actually be a small old person, but still, it's not very good, is it?
No, it's not.
And the reason I'm showing you all of this is because this is what authoritarianism does when it gets a bee in its bonnet. It comes out with this ludicrous stuff. It's horrendous. Like, this is genuinely dystopian.
Well, it's just tyranny for tyranny's sake, surely.
Yeah.
I mean, how fatal is this new variant that they're trying to suppress, or the new variants that they're trying to contain, I should say?
Exactly. And there have been protests about this as well, if we have a look at the next one. So, yeah. And actually, they make a good point here that normally they're very skeptical about the information that comes out of China because it's often curated to put perceptions in your mind or something like that. And with the start of COVID, you must remember, there was a lot of so-called COVID theatre, whereby we saw stuff happening in China that looked unreal, but where there was a lot of severity being placed on quarantining people, and people like fainting in a shopping centre and so on, as if they had Ebola or something really dangerous. And the argument is that this was used to essentially control our perceptions of an emerging unknown disease to make us more malleable, more amenable to harsh restrictions, lockdowns and so on. And if that's the intent as alleged, then it certainly worked. So we have to remember that when footage like this does come out, even on Twitter, which is a supposedly free platform, there is a possibility that it's to curate our perceptions and so on and so forth. But I think also there's a lot of stuff just happening in Shanghai, as they admit. There's something very dark and very wrong happening out there.
Oh, yes.
And we should pay attention to it, because no one in the West seems to be talking about it over Ukraine.
No, as a matter of fact, I don't think any major broadcaster has talked about this.
Yeah, there will
knowledge.
be notes here and there, but this is major. This is a really big issue, I think. If we go to the next one. Shanghai is China's most populated city, and what's happening there is one of the biggest stories in the world. People are suffering starvation, pets being put down, stores getting looted. This civil unrest should be much bigger news, because civil unrest in China does not happen very often, in the sense that if you are restless in China, the police will not appreciate your human right to protest very much.
No, most don't entertain the idea of revolting because of, Tiananmen Square.
Yeah.
So something must be going down if the Chinese have deemed it rationally necessary to revolt against their monolithic government.
Yes. Yeah, it must be pretty serious.
Yes.
And if we go to the next one, so this is a drone going over saying, please comply with COVID restrictions, control your soul's desire for freedom. Bit of a weird translation there. Do not open the window or sing. control your soul's desire for freedom is a disingenuous translation, I think. But
Do not
nonetheless.
open your window.
Yeah.
We're not that far away from them actually filling them up with bricks, are we?
Well, there was footage early on in the pandemic of them sealing people's doors, but they don't appear to be doing that on such a scale now, for various reasons. Partly because the optics are terrible, but also because there's a lot of doors to
It's
seal.
monstrously inhumane.
Yes. And just to bring a bit of context to all of this footage, let's go through this thread here. So, day 24 of my Shanghai COVID lockdown. So it's been going on for exactly half the time of the Ukraine conflict. Today, the new policy went into effect that classifies each house and apartment community into 3 categories according to the risk level. We were classified as the highest risk level. We are in the lockdown tier, he continues, with the highest restrictions. If we scroll down, the best case scenario is that we can't leave our apartment door for the next week. Then are allowed out of our door, but not our community, for another week. And this is a Westerner, by the way, living in Shanghai. So they're going to be treated better than the local inhabitants in some ways, because they're sort of trying to make Shanghai a show city,
Yes.
a nice place to be, where all of the best things of China meet all of the best things of the world, and so on and so forth. And a lot of this reminded me of a recent podcast we did. It reminded me of the capital from the Hunger Games. We were talking about this recently. I did this premium video with Carl, because it does seem like the capital in China is woefully out of touch, in a sense, with what's actually going on in the ground. And now you might think my reference to the Hunger Games is a bit facetious, but as we muse upon the relationship between teenage sports celebrities and authoritarian dictators here, let's spare a thought for the Chinese Winter Olympic skiing star who I covered a few months ago, Eileen Gu. We go to the next one. She was mentioned by President Xi Jinping a couple of days ago. A nice little crack about red bean buns and her love of food. Good old chuckle, a round of applause. Isn't that lovely? And she was present in the speech. Oh, isn't that wonderful that China produces such lovely young people?
Isn't it?
And and then in response, we have another video, which is her improvising a melody on the piano. Again, not staged at all, just spontaneous. And a Chinese government official putting that out. All the great things from China. Young, beautiful, talented people.
Prosperous.
Isn't that amazing? Yes. And this all reminds me of a little bit of Katniss Everdeen in The Hunger Games.
Yeah.
Now, of course, she's
I can
much
see
more
that.
of a voluntary part in China's state machine, but she's still a teenager, and she's being dragged out as things are going really badly in some parts of China to be like, oh, look at this, isn't this wonderful? In a bit of the way that the Hunger Games are, in a sense.
No, I can definitely see that contrast.
And not all Chinese netizens have been so kind to her, so a quick post here. I'm heading back to the US now, but next time there's a game in China, I'll still be Chinese. Oh, that was funny.
Well, how convenient.
Yeah. But what happens in China, of course, doesn't stay in China. This is a globalized world economy. And if we go to the next one, this will have a knock-on effect in the economy. As they say, only semiconductor factories and a few other key industries are still working. Apart from the human and animal tragedy in China, the rest of the world should prepare for massive consumer goods shortages with huge business and livelihood consequences here. Utter carnage. And that seems to be right, because if we go to the next image, this is port congestion outside China. All these ships waiting to go into Shanghai, Ningbo, Zhoushan, Qingdao, Rizhao, Tianjin. There's just big queues outside of all of them because the cities are locked down. They can't man these facilities at speed.
And that would have a lot to do with the food shortages.
Well, China does produce a lot of foods. There's no I believe they produce more food than they consume by a significant margin. They're some of the world's biggest producers of cereal crops. So the problem seems to be food distribution, not food production. And the problem fundamentally seems to be the state saying, oh, we can do food distribution. No, you can't. Evidently. You just completely fail. Even in China, which prides itself on having a very interfering state, the state is no match for the free market when it comes to distributing food. It's one of the best things the free market does.
You have to credit it for that.
Yeah.
Yes.
And meanwhile, economic integration of the West with China is a big issue. So there's this report here on the UK dependence on China for critical minerals. This is by the China Research Group, which is an advisory group at British Parliament set up by some Conservative MPs. And I'll just quote a short extract here. Global demand for critical minerals is set to soar in the next 2 decades. As a result, a race to secure supplies of critical minerals is underway. One nation has a huge head start. China dominates the refining and processing of critical minerals, controlling up to 90% of this stage of the midstream of the supply chain. While its dominance was partly fueled by Western offshoring, the Chinese government has systematically supported its rare earths industry with strategic industrial policy. This raises clear concerns of strategic dependence at a time when Beijing is deepening its state control of the rare earths industry. This is compounded by the ethical questions of opaque supply chains and environmental issues of high carbon supply chains. So the last point they're alluding to the fact that there can be things which we would consider slave labor. Factories. We've all seen the famous netting outside iPhone factories in China to catch people jumping out of the windows because the working conditions are so bad. Now, that was a long time ago, but this is still China.
Yes.
So, and with high carbon supply chains, they're referring to Western carbon offshoring, which is where they get the same good made in China instead of the UK, so they can say, oh, look, we've lowered our carbon emissions, aren't we so green? When it's still made with Chinese coal in China.
Quite.
Anyway. But that's not the only thing. If we have a quick look at this one here, the takeover of Newport wafer fab by the Chinese. And this is a real... this is quite close to my research field, and it's a real, like, head desk moment sort of thing. So, let's go through it. Newport wafer fab is a silicon and compound semiconductor foundry in Wales, which was bought in July 2021 by Chinese-owned firm Nexperia.
Excellent.
On 1st of April 2022, the government said no decisions had been made on its national security review of the takeover. As well as being the UK's largest semiconductor plant, Newport Wafer Fab was one of the anchor companies for the UK's first Compound Semiconductor Innovation Cluster, CSC Connected. As the chip foundry for CS Connected, NWF was a partner in at least 14 Innovate UK programs to develop gallium nitride and photonics devices, including a project to develop high-frequency GaN designs for 5G defence radar systems. So, Innovate UK essentially manages public grants to business.
Right.
So they've had this company has had at least 14 public money grants for research, and then it's just been sold to China.
Just means
Yep, fabulous, brilliant, great capitalism, guys. Keep it coming.
whose policy was this?
Well, it's not policy. This is the thing. This just happens because there aren't the rules to stop foreign companies coming in and poaching our major innovators like ARM, which was bought up by SoftBank.
So it's the result of a lack of market regulation.
Well, I wouldn't put it that way. It's the result of it's a complicated issue, but fundamentally in the UK we don't have safeguards for keeping our IP advantages that we have. We just allow foreign companies to come in, buy up, outsource, job done. And we've been betraying our innovation sector for decades doing this with computers, with cars. And so, like, many people forget that the computer was technically invented here. You've got Charles Babbage and Alan Turing and so on. And of course, many of the major innovations happened in America and some in Japan and so on. But we did, by some arguments, have the first computer here, and just poor economic conditions and policy resulted in us having no computer companies nowadays.
You can see how an argument in favour of protectionism can be made here.
Yes, absolutely. It's a complicated question. I don't claim to have all the answers, but certainly when the buyer is China, I think we ought to be a little more circumspect.
Yes.
Yeah. Especially after what we've seen happening in China recently.
And forward thinking, especially given that their focus on, shall we say, influencing and investing in the African region has led them to be able to make the claim that they're reducing their carbon emissions by shutting down coal plants in mainland China, but building the same amount of coal plants and in Africa.
Absolutely. Just to continue, China's 14th five-year plan from 2021 to 2025 specifically identifies compound semiconductors as an area where China could take the lead in a field where it isn't as far behind as it is in conventional silicon-based chip making. So the idea of compound semiconductors is they could be the next generation of semiconductors. Right. Now, obviously, the West and so on are very good at silicon-based chips. That's what all of our devices are using at the moment. But in the future, it could be compound semiconductors overtaking silicon in many of those areas. China is behind in some ways in silicon-based, but they could, if they are able to successfully move into compound semiconductor manufacturing, they could sort of jump ahead, which would be very good for them strategically, very sensible policy. Nexperia is owned by the Shanghai-based Wingtech. Almost 30% of Wingtech's shares can be traced back to the Chinese government entities, investment screening specialists Data found. And this is not uncommon at all. You have a Chinese private company which is actually state-owned. What a surprise. Imagine my shock.
Yeah,
It's just the way they run their economy. And it's a way of exerting political control over corporations which, although they generate lots of money and prosperity, can be a political threat if not managed. And the way the Chinese do this is that they integrate them within the party structure, often by placing party members on the boards or behaving in a sort of tyrannical and arbitrary way.
It was
towards
what
billionaires.
used to be called corporatism.
Really?
Yes. As in that's quite, or at least that was the term used for how the Nazi Party actually structured its economy.
Wow. The parallels are quite striking. I didn't
Yes.
realise that was called corporatism, though.
Yes,
Gosh.
it has been referred to as corporatism. Yes.
And finally, they say Shanghai's next science and technology plan focuses on building the silicon carbide and gallium nitride compound semiconductor industry with ambitions for a silicon carbide valley, which is quite a nice buzzword.
Silicon Carbide Valley.
Yeah, because that will be the silicon carbide will be the next
Yeah, I see
thing
it.
after silicon. So it's smart at least. And then finally, I thought just to bring it home, we have this lovely story to demonstrate how interrelated the Chinese economy and the West are. China Energy paid $4.8 million to Hunter Biden.
Oh, brilliant!
I know. The documents show that over a 14-month period in 2017 and 2018, a Chinese firm, CEFC China Energy, which was founded by Yi and whose non-profit wing was run by Ho, paid $4.8 million to an investment vehicle controlled by Hunter Biden. During that same time frame, Hunter Biden's firm transferred $1.4 million to James Biden's consulting firm, according to bank records and a report released by Senator Charles Grassley, Republican, Iowa, ranking minority member on the Senate Judiciary Committee. So yeah, it's amazing how far the tangled web stretches.
The mind boggles, doesn't it?
I know, it does.
Thank you for watching, and if you appreciated that segment from the podcast Lotus Eaters, you can support us and find more content at lotuseaters.com. For instance, this new article from Josh Firm, The Unknowability of the Global Elite. And if you would like to find more from him and follow him, you can find him on Getter at Josh_Firm. Thank you and goodbye.